Okay, good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? Awesome. So we're going to start with number 3. This time, topic 3. It's an extension of what we talked about last time. What did we discuss last time? Opportunity cost and what was it? Marginal cost. What's the thing with marginal cost? Francis? Uh-huh. Exactly. Diminishing marginal utility, increasing marginal cost. So, can you tell me then, Francis, what is diminishing marginal utility? Okay, each additional unit becomes less and less valuable. So if we have a quantity here, how many we're talking about? And we had some sort of like measure of value, like price. The most I'm willing to pay for something. That's what we did last time. We would say the first unit be worth a lot. Second unit, high, but not as high. Third, lower, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We also had, what was the other one? Increasing marginal cost. What does that cost? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. So the first unit is pretty cheap to make, second unit a bit more expensive, third and fourth and fifth, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, what does that look like? For those who had some exposure to economics before, this is looking pretty familiar. Yeah, Liam? It looks like supply and demand, exactly. Because I only have like maybe 4 units here, but really in practice, just not 4 units, or even 400, even 4,000, maybe 4 million units. So we're just going to draw a line like this, which we call demand. But you can think of demand as a whole bunch of the most people are willing to pay for the nth unit. So we might throw in an abbreviation here. It's really marginal benefit. Similarly, each additional unit costs more and more to make. When we draw a nice line like here, we call it supply. But resist the temptation to think of supply as amount. Supply is not amount. Quantity is amount. Supply is really what?
How much is being sold?
Nope, that's amount. How much is being sold is amount.
How much you have?
Nope, that's amount. Just as demand is marginal benefit, supply is going to be
As much as you're willing to sell.
cost. It's weird, I know, but don't blame me, I didn't name these things. But this is why we think in terms of demand slopes down, each additional unit becomes less and less beneficial, supply slopes up. Each additional unit becomes more and more costly to produce. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Does marginal cost continue to increase in all systems? Because I think there could be a way to make it so that something costs the same amount to make every single time.
Yeah. So we tackle this in great detail in 202 in micro when we sort of mapping out firms, individual companies. Because you're right. Like if I make one car, that car's going to be very expensive. But I make 1,000 cars, and each car is going to be pretty cheap, right? Because I can spread out the initial costs among multiple units, and if I specialize, I can get more productive, and all this stuff. So there's these issues of fixed costs, which is not in this model. It's sort of subtly in there, but we are mapping out an entire industry. We're not mapping out a particular company. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions? It's a great question. Any other questions? Okay. And where marginal cost is marginal benefit, what do we get?
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium. The equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Also, this is not just the equilibrium, but also the optimal. In this class, the equilibrium and the optimal are the same thing. The equilibrium represents what people naturally do. The optimal represents what we want people to do, what the best for society. We simplify here, we say what's equilibrium is optimal, people will naturally do the optimal. If you take 202, that relationship will then unravel. And we will talk in circumstances, what is required for what people naturally do, not map with what we want them to do. If we include this idea of pollution, you see a divergence there. If you include an idea of monopoly, you see a divergence there. So we're not going to do that here. We're just building our micro foundations for macro purposes.
So supply is marginal cost
Mhm.
because the more supply you have, the less.
The more amount that you make, the harder it is to make it.
The more amount that you make, the harder it is to make it.
Yes. For the industry. So an individual company, right, they want to get we call them economies of scale. And so that does play out, like individual company, but we're talking about multiple companies. We're talking about a whole industry. And so, like, for example, if you are going to produce oil, the places that produce oil, even when the price is really low, are places that are very naturally productive at producing oil, where the oil is close to the ground, where there's not a lot of big costs. There are these very small scale wells where it is very expensive to pull oil out of the wells because the wells are not very productive. They only produce a few, barrels a day. Those wells only turn on when the price of oil gets really high because the cost of production are so high. And then there's kind of mid-grade areas. And so if you think in terms of the industry, there are very naturally productive areas like places in Saudi Arabia. There are kind of places in the middle. There are places way out on the edge. That's when you can see the supply curve.
So the more there is, the more.
Yeah. The more you produce, the harder it is to produce each additional unit. Because you're picking the low-hanging fruit. Remember, that's what I did with the example of the tree. Remember the tree?
Oh yes, so you're using up the resources, so the more you use, the harder it is to use up.
You're using up the opportunities. I want to say. I guess you're citing the resources as well, right? You're saying these people are going to do this. So another example is if you wanted to teach everybody calculus in the whole world, then the people who are teaching calculus, so you will start with the people who can teach calculus the best, who are most eager to teach calculus, and then it's like, well, that's not enough because you need more teachers. So then you're going to get people who are maybe less interested, or people who are enthusiastic but not super enthusiastic, and you're going to get harder and harder and harder people that are people who are less and less interested in teaching, people who need more and more training to teach well, that kind of thing. It's going to be harder and harder. Or with land, right? If you're growing land. And I'm sorry, if you're growing something on land, you use the most fertile areas. And if it turns out that the wheat prices go really high or the corn prices go really high, then you start going to it's literally called the marginal land, the land that is not as good. And you only use that land if the price is high enough to justify the higher cost. Because it's not as productive, because you're going to need more, you have to spend more on fertilizer, you have to tend to it more, maybe there's a lot of rocks in the way, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's worth dwelling on this because as people, we consume lots of different things. And so people get the demand part very intuitively. The supply side, we typically only produce one or two things over the course of our lives. Right? That's a career race. You're focused and you're producing only this one thing. And so it's easy to not fully understand how the supply curve works. So I'm happy to dwell on this a little bit just so we get there. Good? Yeah.
Equilibrium is what people would normally do, and it's the same as optimal in this case.
Yeah. So in this case, the equilibrium is defined as what people naturally do. What happens? The optimal is what we want to happen. two class I just finished, I assigned everybody as a buyer and seller, and each buyer and seller had different marginal utilities or different marginal costs, and I had them go at it and make a trade, and try to find buyers and sellers. And as predicted by the diagram, they naturally settled on the quantity. Right? They naturally did that, and that is what we wanted them to do. But that was the optimum. Any other questions? Did I do a kind of chart for you? I can't remember if I did that last week. And then we convert the total to margin? Did I do that with you? Did I? Yes? Okay. I see some people nodding head. Okay. So, we have this demand, we have the supply. Let's do the laws. The law of demand states that the price and the quantity demanded move in opposite directions. Comma, Latin. You know what that Latin, how to pronounce that Latin? Seen that Latin before? Excellent. I mean, that's what it translates to, yes. Ceteris paribus is the Latin phrase. As mentioned, that means all other things being equal. What does that mean?
There's nothing like crazy.
What?
Nothing like crazy.
Okay. Nothing crazy going on. No additional things. Yeah.
No external factors, or
No.
not including external factors.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's saying that one option isn't increasing better than the other one.
Well, yeah, exactly right. In other words, the only thing we're changing is the price, and so there aren't other differences. Like the higher price thing isn't better
Yeah.
than the lower price thing. That there's nothing crazy going on. There's no external factors. The only thing we change is the price. Most things we can see that straightforward, but there are cases where it's easy to forget that. For example, I'll use that example again. Oh, I'll use a different. Let's imagine I wanted to go into consulting. I'm new at consulting, and so I've said, you know what, I don't really know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to charge $20 an hour. And when I charge $20 an hour, I get maybe 10 hours of work. Some people contact me and say, oh, could you do a little bit of consulting, do this analysis or something like that? It takes up 10 hours a week. And I say, well, this business isn't going very well. You know, I was going to lower my price, but I forgot to 10. But I mistakenly put in another 0, and now I'm accidentally charging 100. I don't notice this on like the Ask Rabbit thing that I did. And much to my surprise, let's do 25. I get 25 hours instead of 10. I'm more than double. What's going on? So what happened is I started charging $20 an hour, and I got 10 hours of work. There were 10 hours of work people were interested in, right? The quantity demanded was 10. I mistakenly get it up to $100 an hour, so it's 5 times as large. And rather than people being less interested in my work, people are more interested in my work. Does this violate the law of demand? Why do you say yes?
Because if price and quantity move in opposite directions, if you're increasing the price and the quantity of hours,
Yeah. It should go down, right? Yeah, but it went up. What's going on?
Wouldn't it be because people perceive quality based off the price? Like
Yeah.
people,
Tell me more. Absolutely.
Like people assume a Lamborghini is just a much better their car because how expensive it is.
Mm-hmm.
So with services and consulting, people are going to think you're a better consultant because you're charging more than $100 an hour.
Yeah, exactly. I picked consulting because it's really hard to judge how well it is, right? I can't take pictures of my consulting. So people will look for clues. And they'll say, oh, he's charging $100 an hour. He might be pretty good. And so that's what's happening. In other words, ceteris paribus did not hold because two things are changing. Both the price and the perception of the quality. Not necessarily, I'm still the same person. I haven't gotten any better. But the perception has changed. Now, if you're thinking, ooh, this is a sneaky way to make tons of money, if I'm actually really bad, this is not going to work long term. If people are paying $100 an hour, they're expecting a certain level of quality. If I'm not delivering on quality and the information problem goes away and people say, oh, actually, he's really terrible, and I get terrible reviews and so forth, that 25 hours a week is going to fall really fast. But before that happens, ceteris paribus is not applied. Ceteris paribus is not happening. And so this does not violate the law. Yeah.
So what does ceteris paribus mean again?
All other things being equal. Yeah, I should write that down. Any questions? Well, just as there is a law of demand, you can probably guess what the next thing is. What is it? Law of supply. And what do you suppose the law of supply is? Anyone? Price and quantity move in the same direction. Price and quantity supplied. Again, we have ceteris paribus. People who know more Latin than I will sometimes pronounce it something like ceteris paribus or something like that. Ceteris paribus is fine. Now, ceteris paribus doesn't do as much work here. People typically don't make that kind of mistake here, but it is worth emphasizing what the law of supply is suggesting. It says, hey, if you're annoyed at empty shelves, if you want to see lots of stuff available to buy, the best way to ensure that is to ensure the price is high. Because when the price is really low, then producers are not willing to bring that much to market. If the price is really high, then the quantity is really high as well. This happens a lot during natural disasters, especially like during hurricanes, power goes out, and what kind of thing do people need because they can't use refrigerators anymore?
Generators.
So they can use generators. So that would be an example. I'm thinking of something a bit more mundane, often used at tailgate parties. Ice. Nice. And so both ice and generators become really hard to find. There are laws that prevent prices from going up. It's called anti-price gouging laws. If you take 202, you discuss them and other price controls. But for our purposes, you can imagine there are people in other places where the hurricane was not affected. The hurricane did not affect it very much. There's actually a story of there's a hurricane some years ago that hit North Carolina, and some guys who were like college students, and they're like, "Oh, we got a great idea," and they got a bunch of ice, and they rented a refrigerator truck, and they turned that all the way down so it's really cold, put a bunch of ice in there, and drove to the affected hurricane area. And then they started charging like $10 for each bag of ice. Right? you can see the increasing marginal cost, right? They had to drive out there, they had to get this truck, they had to buy the ice itself. These are higher costs, and they're willing to do it if they can sell it for a higher price. But you have to let the price go up. Yeah.
Like, I don't get it because, like, at least from what I see, when there's more of something, like, for example, computers or cars.
Well, yeah, like if so we're going to talk about that in a moment. But if for some other factor the market is flooded with this thing, maybe because it's very easy to grow it, like when the weather's really favorable, they'll grow a lot more oranges, and so then the price of oranges will fall. It's easy to grow oranges, but if you just are moving along the supply curve, what you're talking about is what we're about to talk about that. What you're talking about is a shift in supply curve. This is a moving along, and so.
Also, like, a company will make more of something if it can gain money too. The
Yeah.
price goes up.
Yeah, so it justifies expending the higher costs. In the story of these college students, because they were running afoul of anti-price gouging laws, the police confiscated their vehicle. And then when you take a vehicle, you take it to the impound lot. What else do you do to the vehicle? Turn it off. Guess what happened to all that ice? It melted. Complete waste. But it illustrates this idea that had that law not been in place, there would have been more ice available, right? Because the price was allowed to go up, and that would have justified people incurring a larger cost to bring it to market.
You said that this kind of supply, a change in supply for what?
A shift, what we're about to do.
Oh, yes, not a shift in supply.
No. So what you're talking about are essentially shifts, and this is a movement along. This is suddenly people want a lot more ice, and so if the market is allowed to function well, then people who could bring ice to market, produce ice at a higher cost, are now willing to cover the cost. Just like if the price of something goes down, you are willing to buy more because now you can the lower price justifies you using it for things you normally wouldn't use it for. Like, chicken is really cheap. I'm kind of sick of chicken because I've ate it so much, but chicken happens to be really cheap right now, so now I'm going to buy it because it is so cheap. Or, eggs are really expensive. Maybe I only need a few eggs and not that many eggs because the price is all the way up here, and these uses of eggs I can't justify. Okay, so you're anticipating the big idea. I'm erasing this. Oh, this is keep working on this. Because equilibrium implies things do not change. But do prices change? Yes, all the time. Equilibrium implies that the quantity shouldn't change, but does the quantity change?
Yeah.
Yes, all the time. And so the idea is when we see these price changes, it's always because of something else that happened. There's what we call shifts in supply and shifts in demand. Did everyone get their name tag, by the way? I don't know where the name tags are. Just pass them out and then tell people to. So if you can pass them around to make sure everyone gets theirs. Okay. I could use a market of some kind. Would someone please give me a product that's not smartphones? Because I'm really sick of doing smartphones. Car. This is the market for cars. Oh, that's what happened last time too. And we're just going to focus. We're going to start with demand. We'll focus on the demand. I'm just going to pick a point at random. Don't worry, I will fill in the supply later. Let's imagine in the market for cars, like we'll say the weather gets really bad. It's not a temporary change, it's permanent change. So it's really, really hard to walk places. it's really like annoying. Maybe it's really, really cold, no one wants to walk anywhere. Maybe it's really, really hot, no one wants to walk anywhere. Or take bikes or whatever. What do you think? If the price of cars stayed the same, would you think people would be more cars would be bought and sold or fewer cars would be bought and sold?
More.
More, right? More, right? Because people are like, screw this, I'm gonna drive. Let's imagine though that there aren't any more cars, that the amount of cars stays the same. Would we expect the price of cars to go up or the price of cars to go down? Up. Exactly how far they go up, we don't know. Exactly how much the quantity goes up, we don't know. We just know the direction. We don't necessarily know the magnitude. We also know that there could be other opportunities, right? It's not merely just all quantity or all price. It could be a big price increase and a small quantity increase, or a big quantity increase and a small price increase, or somewhere maybe a little bit more, maybe it's equally, maybe it's one or the other. Let's just draw a whole new function. This is a shift in demand. The benefit of cars has changed, so we are drawing a completely new line to reflect that. Now, exactly which one of these many dots I drew land on is going to depend on the shape of the supply curve. I could draw it really steep. I could draw it really flat. Exactly which one I should draw it in is a 202 concept. It's called elasticity. If you take 202, you talk about it in great detail. It's really fun. But I want to get into that detail here, so we're just going to draw a nice generic one. And as a result, I have a new equilibrium point. The price of cars will go up. The quantity bought and sold will go up. And this is what we call the movement along the supply curve. Because so many people are interested in buying cars, there's a lot more people going to the car dealership. They're saying, we want to get some cars, we want to get some cars. And the car dealerships are maybe being sold out of cars. They have lots of cars that they don't have many cars left in the lot. They're going to say, we need to get more cars. We want to buy more cars from the manufacturer. And the manufacturer is going to start producing more cars. And they might do this by having more overtime for workers. They might have to pay more for the steel because they have to outbid other uses of steel. So the cost of producing it is going to go up. That's the movement along the supply curve. But they are willing to swallow that higher cost because the price that cars are going for is higher. So this is a distinction between a shift in demand, where things have fundamentally changed, and a price and a movement along the supply curve, where the motivation is because there's a change in price. People do different things. All shifts have this two-step process. One, shift a curve. It can be supply and demand. Two, there is then a movement along the other curve as the other side of the market adjusts. Any questions? Great. Now, there are lots of things that can shift supply curve. I'm sorry, doing demand right now. There are lots of things that can shift demand curves. So it's helpful that we make a list of kind of categories of things. Common demand shifters. This particular example is the catch-all category for what we call tastes. Consumers' opinions about stuff change for all kinds of reasons. It can be weather, right? Ice cream sales suddenly become more popular, right, during the summer, for example. Or the weather gets really bad, people want to buy cars. But it can also be technological changes. How many of you own a pager? What's a pager? Does anyone know? Remember what pager is, Lynn?
A sort of pre before cell phones got cheap enough for everyone to have. If somebody contacted, then
Yeah. And it would beep,
yeah,
and then you would see the number that you had to call, and then you had to find a phone, and then I think they might include a little message too.
some
yeah.
later ones could do a message. Even some later ones.
Neat. Early text messaging. And then you would find a phone and you would call the person and figure out what's going on. Like, obviously had pagers, right? So if there was an emergency, they had to get going somewhere. Now pages don't exist anymore because, they do, and there's a couple of random little areas where they still occur. But generally speaking, they don't because smartphones replaced the pagers. The invention of the smartphone changed people's tastes. And now consumers are not interested in pages anymore. So lots of things this is a nice catch-all category for lots of different things.
So it's just like the desires.
Yeah, the desires. Like some people's preferences just change. It could be cultural changes. It could be fashionable changes. Like during what was it called? The Hunger Games first came out. The main character in the Hunger Games, what weapon does that person use? Bow and arrow. And so there were these bow and arrow toys that were out. And when that movie came out, all the younger kids, wanted some sort of bow and arrow toy, and for Christmas. And the prices of those shot up. It didn't have to be Mattel, it didn't have to be a Hunger Games one. It was just I want a bow and arrow because I want to be like Katniss, right? And that was just a change in tastes. Stuff like that can change it. It's a nice catch-all category. But it is, if we just say change in taste, that would be pretty boring. We can do other things that are interesting. One is the number of consumers. So if there are more people in an economy, if there are more consumers of this particular good, then you're going to see the demand curve shift to the right. For example, in the market for dog food, if more people get dogs, you would expect the demand curve to shift to the right. Not because people who currently have dogs like dog food more, but they are now competing with other people who now simply like dog food because they want to feed their dog. There are more consumers of dog food, more buyers. That makes sense?
So it's shifting to the right means same quantity but just higher prices.
So I use the term, so thank you for emphasizing this. You can see that if I shift the demand curve to the right, if I draw a new demand curve and I just draw it over to the right, it's going to look the same as if I shift it up. I draw the same. So I will use the term, you can think of demand as shifting up or right. It will result in the same line. Similarly, demand shifting down, right? If we shift the demand curve down, that will result in the same line as if we shift it left. It's the same thing. That's why I draw these arrows right here. You see these two arrows, up and right. So I typically like to use terms right and left, because if you shift either supply or demand to the right, it always expands the market. Right? The quantity will always be larger. If you shift supply and demand to the left, then it always shrinks the market. Quantity will always be smaller. So I like to do right and left. For me, it's intuitive. I don't know if it actually is intuitive for other people. So if it's not intuitive for you, let me know. And I try to present it in different ways so you can use what best works for you. But this is why I emphasize demand is benefit. So you can also think in terms of it being up. The demand gets higher, right? Because the benefit goes up. Similarly, supply is cost. So if we shift the supply curve up, it gets costlier with delivery.
Thank you. paying more for, you're paying the same amount for more. Is that what shift to the right?
Demand shift to the right would mean that there's more exchanged, and the price of what you buy goes up. Yeah. There's more units exchanged, but each unit does get more expensive. Income is a big supply and demand shifter. Grace, if you made more money, what would you buy more of? You said Legos? Awesome, I like you. Lego. I have like this cool lighthouse in my office. It's like that $300 lighthouse, which I did not tell my wife what I got, so I hope she doesn't watch this. But I thought like that felt very like econ trade friendly, so I got it. I love it. I didn't realize how much I missed playing with Legos until I had kids, and then they were buying all these Lego sets, and then I got really jealous of them. So you buy more Legos. That's a good choice, right? What else would people buy more of if they made more money?
Cars.
Cars. Yeah.
Electronics.
Electronics. By the way, should not be hard. Right? Clothes, better food, go out to eat more, vacations. There's a lot of things which, if you make more money, you will buy more of. We call these normal goods. And services. I get into when I keep writing and services over and over again. Eventually get tired of writing and services over and over again. So sometimes there's like one exception in this class when I say goods, I literally only mean goods. So generally when I write goods, I mean also services. In these cases, when your income goes up, the demand curve will shift to the right. Or if you want to have it shift up, you can have it shift up. We good so far? The fact, though, that I am saying, well, when we do income, we should think in terms of normal goods, suggests there's another thing we should think of. There's an exception to that. And it's true. Can you think of something where if you were to make more money, you would say, you know what, I'm not going to buy this anymore? McDonald's. Right? Generally fast food, right, is a classic example. What else? By the way, McDonald's is a classic thing where now that I have kids, I'm really sick of. Rather than Legos being something more. And technically, I forgot to mention Legos is incorrect. Lego Group is very big on this. It's Lego bricks, Lego sets. Lego is an adjective. The plural of Lego is Lego. Just so you know. What else would people buy less of if they made more money?
Just
Discount brands such as
like the store branded paper towels or toilet paper, like the thinner,
yeah,
quality one.
yeah, like the bad toilet paper, the sandpaper toilet paper. Yeah. For some reason, my wife loves. I don't really understand. No one in the family understands why. But yeah. Anything else? How many of you took the bus to get to campus today? Okay. How do you feel about the bus? Is it fun? It's okay. Usually I get people saying it sucks, right? You have to wait a long time, so you have to transfer, God forbid you have to transfer, right? Bus transportation typically fits into the same category of what we call inferior goods and services. Here, when the income goes up, that implies the demand curve will shift to the left. So if there's a recession, for example, we would expect most businesses, most industries to do worse off. Furniture would be worse off, but certain places would be better off. You're making ramen noodles. I'm talking like the packaged ones, not the fancy restaurant ones. You would expect that. Food made at home is also an inferior good. I use that as an example because I don't want you to think inferior means of poor quality. That is not what inferior means in economics. An inferior good does not mean of poor quality. Your cooking at home is probably quite good. It can be really good and still be an inferior good. Because cooking, as anyone knows who cooks, takes our kitchen is constantly messy. Like this is, by the way, one of the things I never realized until I became an adult. You're just constantly cleaning the kitchen. It's like, especially when you have kids, you're just constantly cleaning the kitchen, right? And so if we made a lot more money, we would eat out more, which means it's an inferior good. Another example of an inferior good is one you're doing right now. What is it?
Education.
Education. Why do you say education is an inferior good? Exactly. And so when there is like one of the reasons our enrollment is down is because the economy is fundamentally quite good. People say I'm not going to go to school because education is inferior good. And when the economy does poorly, we get an increase in people attending. Similarly, when the economy is doing poorly, grocery stores get more activity. Right? Again, inferior does not mean poor quality. Any questions on that? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Things that you would not do if you had more money. Okay. Last one. Price of related goods and services. Can anyone think of two goods you tend to consume together?
Peanut butter and jelly.
So that's what people like to say we have to be careful of. Well, you and I might think that. Other people say yucky. It's a cultural thing. Right. Who said yucky? Who said it was disgusting?
No, I like jam better than
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't consider
You wouldn't consume peanut butter and jelly together. Yeah. It's not top of the list. Well, when I make test questions, I do have to think about that. I learned that pretty quickly, and I have to be careful. Grace? Chips and dip is a good example, right? I think most people will eat chips and dip together. I think I saw yeah. Cereal and milk, another good example. Pants and shirt. Sure, yeah. I can see that. And bread and butter. Right? Perfect. So we can come up with lots of different things that are consumed together. We call these goods complements. Note that it's a complement with an E, not a complement with an I. I don't want to see anyone spelling compliments with an I, because compliments with an I that's a nice hat. Right? But that hat and gloves are complements with an E. Complements are goods that tend to be consumed together. Thus, if the price of one, and I'll just label that A, the price of one of them goes up, would we expect people to buy more of that good or less of that good? If the price of bread goes up, you buy more bread or less bread? Less bread. If you buy less bread, do you need more butter or less butter? Less butter. Therefore, the demand curve for the other thing shifts. If the price of oil goes up, then the demand for SUVs goes down. I'm sorry. No, I went the other way. Did I do that right? Yeah, I know I did that right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Then the price of SUVs goes down because they tend to be consumed together. What do you suppose the opposite of complement is?
Competing goods.
Thank you for saying. Yeah, that's a really stupid looking shirt, right? No, not competing goods. I like that. Competing goods. We call them substitutes. Are or tend to be. That tend to be. Instead of one. This is why I really can't use peanut butter and jelly anymore. Because in some cultures, they are complements. In other cultures, they are substitutes. And I'm like, that's confusing as a test question. Let's just steer clear of that. If the price of one of them goes up, the demand for the other good. Anyone give me examples of substitutes?
Coke and Pepsi.
Coke and Pepsi. Though I like to avoid brand names. But you're right, they're very close substitutes. But on test questions, I don't like because I want to do whole industries, and if I'm doing a brand name, I'm doing a particular company. That's a little weird. Gas and electric. So as the price of gas goes up, people will buy fewer SUVs, but as the price of gas goes up, people buy more electric cars and hybrids. They are substitutes. Yeah.
Lunch meat instead of prepared sandwiches.
Lunch meat instead of prepared sandwiches. Yeah. What else? Chicken and beef, classic ones, right? Typically don't consume them together. What's a substitute for eggs? It's a good substitute for eggs. Anyone can think of one? What'd you say? Tofu? For some people, yeah. Hash browns, maybe? It depends on what you're doing the eggs for. If you're going after the protein, you can just pick some other meat. If you're going to think of it like in terms of like a breakfast food and we need some breakfast and we don't want to get eggs anymore because eggs are really expensive, then we can imagine more people going after hash browns or something else, cereal. You know, if you want the protein, you could be doing some meat or tofu. Tofu has some protein in it. I think because it's beans. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah.
So, from my understanding, the demand currently tells me like the relationship between the export money, but so does the supply.
That's why I said when I did the demand curve, I said as the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes up. So it's telling us about how much people are willing to buy, while supply is how much people are willing to produce. Anyone else? Okay. So that's common demand shifters. Let's do supply. Let's go erase this whole thing. I'm going to keep the market for cars. So we'll do cars again. And this. I hope you got this because I reversed it. So, we have a upward sloping supply curve, which again, we remember is marginal cost. And this is the market for cars. We have this nice intersection right here, and this nice intersection, right? This particular price right here, this particular quantity right here. And let's imagine, where'd my red marker go? Try it again. Oh, there it is. The price of steel goes up. Cameron, let's imagine that the number of cars that are made does not change. Would you expect that as a result of this higher price of steel, that the price of cars sold would go up or go down?
Because steel does not change.
No, I'm saying the amount of cars produced does not change. So we still have the same number of cars, quantities hold constant, but would we expect higher priced cars or lower priced cars as a result of a higher price of steel? Keeping in mind cars are mostly made of steel.
Price goes up.
Price goes up. Yeah, exactly. Why? Yeah, some of the higher costs of producing of buying that steel is going to be passed on to the consumer. Right. If the price of cars remained exactly the same, would manufacturers make more cars or fewer cars as a result of a higher price of steel? Yeah, fewer cars. Exactly. I totally agree. Why? Yeah. It's like, look, we have to allocate more of our budget to buying steel, which means we can buy fewer other parts. And therefore, we're not going to make as many cars. And just as before, we can imagine different combinations of this scenario. I'm just going to draw a whole new supply curve. Note, it's a little strange. I drew the supply curve higher than before. And so people will think, this is weird, the supply went up. But remember, supply is not amount. Quantity is amount. Supply is cost. This is why I emphasize the cost part. It is harder to make cars. Now, exactly which of these combinations we will land on will depend on how consumers react. Again, I can draw it steep. I can draw it shallow. I'll just draw a generic demand. And we have a higher price of cars with fewer cars bought and sold. And then the consumers are like, you know what? There's a movement along the demand curve. I say, oh, these cars are kind of expensive now because the price of steel is so high. I am not going to bother doing that. We see this happen. For example, the price of lumber has gone up over the years. My wife and I, on our to-do list, the things to do to the house, is we want to replace our deck. And then we see the price of lumber, and it's really high. We're like, you know what? We don't need to replace that deck. Like, we just will be more careful when we go out on it. Because it kind of shakes a little bit. We're like, oh, we're not sure about that. Because, you know, the value that we have of a really nice deck is it's up there, but it's not super high. And because the price has gone up, we drop out of the market. Right? The market reallocates seamlessly using the price mechanism. Again, first step, shift a curve. Second step, move it along. So on exams, I really just care about the shifting part. The moving along is implied. The most interesting part is the shift. But it's helpful to have that language. So when someone says, as Josiane was talking about, I can say that was a moving along the session. Any questions so far? Common supply shifters. Productivity. That's a nice, just like tastes was for demand, productivity is a nice catch-all category. How would you reflect that a bunch of fires destroyed some buildings and made it hard for people to make because a bunch of car factories burned down? Well, that's a shift in supply. How would you reflect that there's maybe more regulations around cars and they have to like put a bunch more safety requirements on them? Well, that's a shift. That's productivity. How would you capture this idea that maybe there's massive strikes and there's concerns about strikes for auto workers? Well, that's a shift in supply. It's a nice catch-all category.
What is understanding the science, but generally speaking, like more barriers to making something?
Yeah, or easier to make something. So, like, it can be a technological improvement. For example, in the market for books, what happened after the printing press was invented? Well, the supply curve shifted down. It shifted to the right because now it's easier to make books because it's more productive. Productivity increased.
So why hurts shifts up after shifts up?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Supply shifting, either left, comma up, because shifting it up is the same thing as shifting it left, or right slash down, because if it goes down, it's cheaper to make something. Also, we can think in terms of it shifting to the right. In either case, same line, expands the market on the right, shrinks the market on the left. Yeah. It's low value versus high value.
So left is low and
And wait. Wait. So wait, I'm talking about supplier demand. So demand on the right are low value uses. On the left are high value uses. If we start high, we're going to diminish your marginal utility, increase smartphone costs. Number of producers is also going to be a shift, just like number of consumers. So this is why the effect of immigration is ambiguous on unemployment, because on one hand, if you have more immigrants, there's more people buying stuff. At the same time, if you have more immigrants, there's also more people like providing stuff. Right? Higher, they typically come to the United States to like do things, like and work. Both curves shift. In our class, though, we only shift one. We're just trying to get the basics down. Input prices. Does anyone know what an input is? Yeah, Anthony.
Raw material.
Raw materials. Can you give me an example?
Steel.
Steel is such an example. Perfect, just like the one we use here. It doesn't have to only be the raw materials, like the physical things. It can also be labor. It can also be the cost of the infrastructure, like the factory. It's just really anything that goes into the company in order to make the thing. What, by the way, is the opposite of an input? An output. What is actually produced, what is actually made. Okay. On that note, and I think sometimes in the notes it lists this as the same thing, but taxes and tariff. So yesterday there was a big concern that President Trump would do what? Yeah. Yeah. Wasn't it 10 on? Was it 10 on Mexico and? Or maybe I think it was China.
10 on China.
It was 10 on China. Okay, so 25 on Mexico and Canada import products. By the way, does anyone know what Canada imports? Lumber? So you still do fur? So there's a lot of energy, yeah, a lot of oil. Lumber is a big one as well. There's a few other things. I think pharmaceutical products come in. Anyway, all that stuff, tariff will make it costlier to provide the good, shifts it to the left. If anyone says, oh, no, we don't pay it, other people pay for it, that is not the case. We swallow at least some of that cost in the form of higher price. Any questions about these four? If producers, so it's always some underlying thing. So for example, and I think I alluded to this earlier, if the weather is really favorable to growing oranges, then it becomes more, productivity of orange growers goes up. And there's tons and tons of oranges, the supply curve will shut down. And as a result, the price goes down. So is that?
Oh, talking about the number of producers.
The number, oh, I'm sorry, number of producers. So I see your question again. I want to make sure I got it.
That the number of producers increases as the population.
Yes, no, absolutely. So if this goes up, that implies supply shifts to the right. Expands the market. Because again, that's why I think in terms of right and left, because it's usually easy to see logically, should this make the market bigger or should it make it smaller? If it makes the market bigger, then it shifts it to the right. Because whether you're shifting demand to the right or supply to the right, both of them are going to cause quantity to increase. On the other hand, if logically this should shift it should make the market smaller, then something is shifting to the left. Whether it's supply or demand, something's shifting to the left. And that's going to cause the quantity to fall. And so I personally find it helpful to think in terms of right, left, and expanding and contracting the market. If that works for you, that's great. If not, please let me know, and we can talk about other ways. It's worth mentioning that in a lot of ways, your professors are the worst people. Like, seriously the worst. Not necessarily the worst, but really bad. Overvalued, I should say. Do we know why?
They're another subject. It's hard to explain something that you're fluent in to someone who doesn't.
Exactly. I know this stuff for 20 years. I don't know what it's like not to know. I can't remember that. I learned it way back when I was in college, and then like I've been teaching it forever. I've forgotten what it's like. And so I rely on you. Be like, if I say something, I'm like, this seems obvious, but it might not be. It might only be obvious to me. You need to call me on that. Because I've forgotten what it's like not to know it. If you've ever end up doing any teaching at all, whether it's professionally or if you have kids you're teaching them things, never tell them something is obvious. It's only obvious to you because you've done it a lot. But when my kids were learning to walk, they fell over a lot. I would never tell them it's obvious or easy. You all think it's easy to walk because you walk all the time. Practice, practice, practice. Last one. Our friend opportunity cost. I got 2 minutes. I got time. I got more than 2 minutes. I got like 10. Awesome. This one, though, requires a little bit of explanation. This is going to be the market for corn. And we have an upward sloping supply curve and a downward sloping demand curve. Oh, let's throw in our P's and Q's. Sometimes I add a little star to distinguish it from the axis. And let's imagine the profitability of wheat goes up. Now, first and foremost, note I said profitability. I didn't say price. There are some textbooks which will use price as an example. It drives me crazy because then it's not clear. Are we talking about wheat and corn as substitutes, or are you talking in terms of opportunity costs? So I use profitability because consumers don't care about profitability, but producers should. If you are growing corn on your land, what are you not growing? You're not growing wheat. If you can make a lot of money growing wheat, what has happened to the cost of you growing corn?
It's going up.
It's gone up. Why?
You're losing out on the money from growing wheat.
Yeah, your opportunity cost has gone up, and opportunity cost is like any other cost. Supply curve shifts up. Supply curve shifts to the left. And the price of corn will also have to go up. Unless it'll be bought and sold. So there's a lot of overlap between opportunity costs and number of producers. Because we can imagine people saying, I'm not going to grow corn anymore, I'm going to grow wheat, I'm going to leave the corn market and enter the wheat market. And I use this example because this is what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. In Europe, Ukraine, does anyone know what Ukraine is known for? Wheat. 20%. 20%? It's a lot. That's a lot. 20% of what? 20% of global exports for wheat? Wow. I thought it would just be confined to the EU. It could be wrong, but I don't know. I mean, you seem to remember some number. The point is, it's known for growing wheat. It's Europe's breadbasket. It sends us wheat all over. But then, of course, the war interrupted that. There was a blockade in the Black Sea. It's obviously hard to grow wheat, too, if there's a war going on. Certain fields, were disrupted. You can't go there anymore. It's a battlefield, all that kind of stuff. And so the price of wheat went up, and wheat became very profitable. And what happened and international agencies were like, oh my goodness, we're going to have food shortages. But we did not. The prices did not go crazy high. They went up a little bit, but then they go crazy high. Because what happened? Other people started growing wheat. The price induced action. And the market adapted. And so rather than having just one product get a lot more expensive, a few products got a little bit more expensive. Because people switched out of some things. And if you're gonna induce people to grow corn, you're gonna have to pay them more because their opportunity cost has gone up. And thus we reached a new equilibrium. Now this idea of markets reacting to stimulus, that prices can be used to coordinate action and remove a lot of the ups and downs of the realities of these shifts, is going to be a big theme that we'll be talking about next time. And it's going to be a big theme too of your ed puzzle. And that is going to be due tomorrow night, your ed puzzle, on the pickle problem. I think I'm getting my schedule right. Am I getting my schedule right? Let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So it's one of my favorite Planet Money, one of my favorite ed puzzles. So what we're going to be talking about next time is economic systems, capitalism versus socialism, and the role of prices. So I will see all of you then. I hope you have a fantastic couple of days.